Hello chess friends and welcome to Yazarov's chess channel and welcome to our Garry Kasparov series. So in this series we're following Garry's life and his chess career, and we're back now in the 1984 World Championship match between Kasparov and Karpov. And so far we have covered two games in which Karpov won. So before this round 7 that we are covering today, Karpov had a comfortable 2-point lead, and it was really incredible in the two games that we have covered how Karpov never allowed Kasparov some kind of a counterplay. He never allowed him to spread his tactical wings because Kasparov really loved these dynamic games, and Karpov used to really slow down the pace, which I think didn't fit for Garry Kasparov. This game 7 will be a similar one. Of course, again, Kasparov is searching dynamics. On the other hand, the boa constrictor Karpov is trying again to slow down the pace. Let's check out now the game 7 as usual. It's really a beautiful chess game. So d4 played by Karpov, d5 by Kasparov, c4, e6, knight to f3. So far the queen's gambit declined. The c5, the Tarrasch defense. We have c takes d5. What we want to do is of course undermine the pressure in the center, which is very important, and I've mentioned it many times, but as I like to repeat myself and show you some important things in chess, when we have some kind of a dynamics in the center, when we have a pawn collision, you should always evaluate what kind of an outcome can be played in this dynamic. So we don't want to risk now this isolated pawn situation. That's why here Karpov played c takes d5. We have e takes d5, and you see now we can even wait black to take the pawn on d4, or we can take the pawn on c5, and black is continuing with the isolated pawn. So as I always mentioned also in my videos, the isolated pawn idea can be sometimes an advantage, but also it can be a disadvantage, and I've covered this isolated pawn situations in my basics in chess series videos. If you want to study more these types of position, I'll show you the link at the end of the video. You can maybe learn some strategies. I've covered more than 170 videos in my basics in chess series, so you can maybe study the isolated pawn situation, because it's a pattern that you should recognize in your own game. So that's why here Karpov played so far a good game. We have g3, but this is still normal theory of the Tarrasch. We have g3, knight to f6, bishop to g2, and now bishop to e7. Castling played also by Kasparov. We have knight to c3, and now we have knight to c6. Here comes bishop to g5, and as I mentioned also in the preparation against the Tarrasch, now after the move bishop to g5, black has basically two good choices. So either black will play the move c4, where the pawn structure will be static, or black will take c takes d4. Then we would have sort of an open game. So that's why, of course, we know that Kasparov is a dynamic player. He takes c takes d4, knight to d4, and now h6. Bishop to e3. This is the main line, because knight to g4 is not so dangerous. We can take. That's the most important thing. And after something like here knight takes e3, we have to take out with the pawn, but still we have grabbed the pawn. We can remaneuver our knight here to c3, knight to e4. The bishop has a good diagonal, so that's why it's not a problem so far to continue from white's perspective. So here bishop to e3, so knight to g4, not such a good idea here for white, for black, pardon me. Here we have rook to e8, and now queen to b3. This is a provocative move by Karpov. Very nice opening prep, because he wants, of course, further to attack the d5 pawn. It's not a problem that Kasparov cannot protect this. It can be protected with move knight to a5, which was played by Kasparov. But now, at least we have a new square for our queen. We want to play the move queen to c2, and we have now finished our development. So let's go back. It was really a trick sort of by Karpov, because when we play an opening, there are these three stages of the opening. First, we should develop all of our minor pieces. Then we should secure our king, and then we should remaneuver the queen to the second, third, or fourth rank and connect the rook. So these are the three stages, and if you manage to do that in an early stage of the game, then you have a good setup to continue from. And that's why queen to b3, of course the queen is not going to stay there, but now after knight to f4, queen to c2 we can play, and still we have now a rook connection. This knight is out of game. It's a little bit on the edge of the board, so we have now, I think, a good setup. You see the queen and the bishop are aiming on light squares. We have a centralized knight. The bishop is on a good square, the knight is on a good square, so far a good setup. And what we want to do in open and dynamic games, this is sort of an open game, then it's a time really to play with your pieces towards the center. Every piece has to be centralized. That's the basic rule of open games. And I've mentioned that also in my basics in chess series videos, this open center position. So now it's time to occupy the center maybe with the rook to c1, rook to d1. All of the pieces have to be played towards the center. That's the most important thing in this type of structure. So bishop to g4. Kasparov is developing his bishop. We have knight to f5. Maybe better ideas now to play here the move knight to c4. At least we're creating another tempo. We're centralizing the knight. Okay, white can play maybe the move bishop to f4 and now bishop to g4. But okay, in the game Kasparov played bishop to g4. We have knight to f5 attacking the bishop, and now rook to c8 with some threats maybe to play the move d4 and trap the knight, because the rook is of course on the same file like the queen. There are maybe some tactical possibilities. But in the game, Karpov simply takes. He takes the bishop. We have rook to e7. What we can notice now that in an open game, the bishops are perfectly fine. So at least Karpov has some kind of a slightly advantage here. He has the bishop there. He still can play the blockade idea. The blockade idea is the best against an isolated pawn. So we can place our bishop here. We can play rook to d1, maybe really further support our blockade against the isolated pawn and build our attack really slowly, and then trying to attack the weak d4 pawn with some more pieces. So first the blockade idea, and then regrouping, putting the pieces on the best squares, and then attack the d5 pawn. So rook to d1 comes of course with that idea. d4 so far not possible. We have queen to e8 and now h3. Here bishop to h5. Bishop takes d5. Karpov simply takes now the pawn. Here bishop to g6. Even if you try here something like rook to e3, could be very dangerous because after f takes e3, okay, you could maybe get a check, but I'm not seeing now a good continuation. And it's really unclear what's going on here. I'm not sure if that would be a sacrifice, because you don't have any, I think, such a good support. You can maybe take out the bishop, but we can still take, and the problem is still, you see this e2 pawn is protected. We have attacked now both pieces on the fifth rank, so that's why it's still not a good tactical shot. So after the move bishop to d5, we have bishop to g6, queen to c1, again regrouping, keeping the position compact. We want now also to build our defense around the square e3. Now maybe with the good piece activity, there are some tactical threats around the square e3, so that's why queen to c1, very important move. Knight to d5, we have rook to d5, and now knight to c4. We have bishop to d4, very nice move by Karpov, again centralizing move, and now comes rook to c7. What Kasparov is trying to do is maybe to play some kind of a tactic to somehow liberate this knight, and maybe try something like b5, b4, opening the b file, because we have now very nice battery against the queen. But Karpov is not allowing this scenario. He plays simply b3, kicks away this very annoying knight from c4, and now he plays rook to e5. We have queen to d7, and now queen to e3. Very nice defensive setup. Okay, Kasparov after the move f6 and the rook to c5 can take now this pawn on h3, but still I think the white pieces are much better placed. They're better coordinated, they're more active, although we don't have any more the light square bishop. But the problem is now this light square bishop cannot be really included into the game. Maybe you could try to maneuver somehow here to e8 and maybe to c6, but it's a little bit maybe too slow, because still white has some counterplays in the game. Rook to d1. Here Karpov plays such a great defensive move. I'm not sure how many of us would play this move, rook to d1. Most of us would probably take out here the knight after something like maybe a takes b6. Of course, there is a new target. So far we cannot take it because the knight is hanging on c3, but in long terms maybe this could be a weakness which we could attack, but not Anatoly Karpov. Here you see really the strength, how he realizes also his opponent's counterattack possibilities. He plays rook to d1 because now Kasparov is trying to open the file, open the g file. He's trying to split open the pawn structure in front of the king. That's why here Karpov plays rook to d4. Very nice move. You cannot take, of course. Rook to d8 will happen with the discovered attack. You lose the rook, and now we have the protection, no h4 possibilities. Very important defensive strategy that Karpov played, and it's really cool how many of these strategies Karpov and Kasparov applied, because I've talked about also in my basics in chess series about this rook lift defense. Sometimes it's necessary to get some kind of a rook lift and defend yourself with the rook. So I'll show you also that link of that video. So the rook lift defense, sometimes it's very, very important to recognize here. Karpov played that rook to d4. We have knight to d7, and now bishop to d6, regrouping again, and bishop to f7. Here Kasparov is trying now desperately to improve his position, to improve his minor piece activity. Here knight to d5, bishop takes d5, and now rook to d5. In the game a6, played by Kasparov, he doesn't want, of course, now to lose the pawn here on a7. So far, it's not possible, because there are also some tactics. Rook to c1, then you get checkmated. It's even not possible here for Karpov to attack these two pawns. But again, in long terms, so far it's not possible. But again, we regroup, we build some kind of a new structure with our pieces, and then when we have maybe defended our back rank, then it's time maybe to sneak in with our queen and attack these two pawns. So in the game, bishop to f4, here knight to f8 was played, queen to d3, and now queen to g4 again. Kasparov is threatening here the move h4. In the game, f3 was played, and instead of this maybe queen to g4 idea, a better idea is to play the move knight to e6. It's slightly better, because you have to retreat well with the bishop, and again now maybe queen to g4, maybe something like rook to d6 can happen, and now h4. Basically white is forced now to bring more pieces into the game. Here rook to c6, rook to c6, b takes c6, and now at least we're forcing now the trades of queens. After queen to f3, e takes f3, after trades of pawns. I think this is playable for black, because black has 2 pawns on light squares that cannot be attacked by the bishop. So here Kasparov missed, I think, this move knight to e6 in order to create some kind of a counterattack. He played a very aggressive queen to g4, and it allows now Karpov to kick away the queen. f3, we have queen to g6, and now king to f2. Everything is compact, everything is glued together, like we like to say here. Really, this very important setup, because now we can play much more freely with our queen, with our rook. Everything is perfectly fine here on the king side. In the game, rook to c2 was played, but now queen to e3. Very, very nice counterattack also by Karpov, because if you take rook takes a2, then you get rook to d8. That was Karpov's preparation. You cannot protect everything. Queen to f7 doesn't work. We'll simply play bishop to d6. You cannot protect it. And if you try something like king to f7, of course, it's even worse. You lose simply material and get checkmated here on the 8th rank. So that's why very, very nice counterattack here. Kasparov has to get back. He has to retreat, he has to protect his back rank. Here queen to e7, and now b5. A new mistake by Kasparov. Again, maybe something like queen to f7 is better. Queen to f7, king to f7. At least this is protected somehow. It is, of course, slightly better for white, because we have the bishop, and the bishop is better to have in when we have pawns on both sides of the board. This is an endgame, so maybe white is slightly better. But I think a great player like Kasparov could defend this, but he made now b5 a huge mistake, because we have rook to d8. You have to take queen to d8, and now queen to f7. Now bishop to d6, and we have sort of a Zugzwang. You cannot move the queen, you cannot move the king, you cannot move the knight. So now the queen can play much more freely. In the game g5, Kasparov tried to liberate himself, but now queen to a8. Now this pawn is hanging. In the game we have king to g7, Karpov takes, queen takes a6. We have queen to d7, a new mistake by Kasparov, bishop takes f8, king to f8, and now queen to f6, check. In this position Kasparov resigned. It's really incredible, because we can grab now many pawns. The king is still endangered. You have to create new tempo. We can take out this pawn. After a potential check, we can cover ourselves and go into a favorable endgame, in which of course we have 3 extra pawns. So that's why here Kasparov resigned. So incredible stuff. 3-0 for Karpov against Garry Kasparov. Really incredible what he did to him in the beginning. He really never allowed him to get back into the game. That's why I don't like to play the Starash defense. I really try to avoid it, because then I'm risking always, but really always, this isolated pawn situation. And as I said here, I'm going to show you my links, how you should play with the isolated pawn and how you should play against the isolated pawn. And here is also this link to this rook lift defense. If you want to study more about defensive play, you can also check out these videos. And we'll continue now to follow this Kasparov-Karpov series. It will be one of the best events in chess history, I think, that you see. And if you like this content, you can also subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and chess is the best, of course.